BBC, and Bethany Dawson, the London Playbook diary reporter at Politico. So very good morning to both of you. Nice to see you both. Inevitably, Ukraine dominates the front pages with so much going on politically on that front. Take us, first of all, Aggie, to the Sunday Times and their take. They are reflecting on the fact that there's a lot of pressure now on European countries and the UK, of course, to boost defence spending in the face of the risks to Ukraine.
That's right. This story is all about defence spending. Of course, at the moment, we spend 2.3% of GDP on defence spending. Labour has promised to go to 2.5%, but hasn't set out a timeline. We're going to find out later this year when that timeline would take place. But according to the Sunday Times, Sir Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, is actually looking at bringing that forward and putting higher defence spending in place, essentially because of what's happening in Ukraine, but also because Donald Trump is in the White House. I mean, I think if it was up to Donald Trump, everyone would be doing 5% of GDP on
That's exactly what he's called for
exactly.
as well.
And I think he sort of would be OK with 3%. But at the moment, it sort of feels like the timeline to get to 2.5%, by the time we get to that point, everyone will be thinking, well, that's just not even enough.
Because they've laid it out as a target, haven't they? But they've said we'll only do it when the economy allows, and it's not clear where that point will come.
Exactly.
But with the US saying we're no longer going to do all the heavy lifting in Europe, Europe has to step up themselves, there is pressure now on countries like the UK to put the money where their mouth is.
Exactly, and the suggestion is that the Prime Minister is up for it, could do it. The Chancellor, we know it's the job of the Chancellor to make sure the finances are in order, something she apparently is not quite ready to do. But then you've got the Foreign Secretary as well going out at this Munich Security Conference, which is currently still going on, began on Friday, where we've had lots of warnings from the US, lots of warnings from President Zelensky too. And David Lammy basically saying, look, if Russia are victorious, then defence spending could go up to 7%, suggesting that's what was spent over the Cold War. So I think some really, really serious warnings this morning, especially suggestions as well. Zelensky suggesting that there should be a sort of European peacekeeping force as well. And how much would that cost? I think question marks over that too.
Absolutely. There's so much up in the air, isn't there? But I should just say that Number 10 have said, they said that when they went into the election, they had this promise of a path to 2.5%. They said that continues to be the position, and there's no issue or disagreement there, because the Sunday Times is implying that Starmer's going to overrule Reeves, but they're suggesting there's actually no disagreement on this, and they've that it's not true that there'll be an announcement before the trip by Keir Starmer to go and see Donald Trump in the next week or so. Take us on, though, to the Mail on Sunday, if you can, because this is one prominent army leader or former army leader calling for more money. Not the first time that we've heard an army chief wanting more cash, but Lord Dannatt has entered into the fray.
Exactly. So Lord Dannatt, who was the head of the army between 2006 and 2010, has suggested that if Keir Starmer doesn't put, I suppose, his money where his mouth is, doesn't put more money into defence spending, then the Prime Minister will head for the dustbin of history. Also suggesting, if there was this kind of peacekeeping force of Europe that I just suggested, that the army, our army, is so run down that it would be unable to make a proper contribution. Also throwing numbers around like 2.5% to 3.5%, kind of looking at that kind of higher end of defence spending, something I'm sure, speaking about that last story, Rachel Reeves would say there is just not the money at the moment.
Well, exactly. And I guess that a lot of people watching might think, well, it sounds sensible in the face of a potential threat. And yet the question is always going to be asked, where would that money come from? Would other departments get squeezed? Schools, hospitals? You know, other hospitals, I think, are always protected, aren't they? But or will taxes have to go up? There's always that question.
Exactly. There's, difference between what sounds sensible and what makes sense, and then what is possible, and where those corners are going to have to be cut. We're going through right now a kind of winter NHS crisis. People are really feeling the effects of these tightened purse strings, and there is going to be a lot of worry at home if we are going to have to further, find places to cut, find kind of corners to shave, where those losses are going to be for this increased spending.
Yeah, and in the meantime, take us to the Observer, Bethany, because this is really reflecting on the sort of big international diplomacy push that is now going ahead, and the suggestion that there's going to be a summit in Paris to try to address some of these concerns, and Keir Starmer there trying this balancing act of keeping on side with Europe and the US.
Yeah, it's this really interesting announcement President Macron in France. They're going to tomorrow likely hold this meeting, a summit to discuss Ukraine and indeed the US pressure around Ukraine and this kind of push that the US is trying to find a solution for the war in Ukraine without Europe. So they're going to be discussing this. The UK are involved. And Starmer is kind of set to see himself as a bridge here between Europe and the US, which is an incredibly difficult and incredibly interesting position to be in. He doesn't have a fantastic relationship with either the US or Europe. We know that his kind of history with Donald Trump isn't exactly smooth sailing, and the same can be said for Europe. So that position as a bridge is going to be incredibly important, but incredibly delicate.
Yeah, and so far it's interesting. He's basically, his sentiments have been in line with Europe, backing Ukraine all the way, and yet we know that he also wants to do business with Donald Trump, and so he wants to keep him on side as well. As you say, really delicate balancing act there, and one to watch closely. We're out of time for now. We will talk about subjects other than Ukraine in the next hour, but thank you both for the time being. See you later.
Mandatory evacuation.